Hello, my dearest members. We are back with the Social Stuff Live number 6 post show event extravaganza for the members. Yay! So, today we're going to be checking out some stuff on the Chicago 7. That is the theme for today's post show. I think it should be a good time. Programming notes. I've added the people who joined the membership yesterday and possibly earlier today to the crawl, so the crawl should be updated for the time being. I'm going to try to update it as often as possible. I want everybody to have their name included and such, so I will try to get on that. If your name is not included, it's likely that I recorded something before you join the membership. It's all based on when I recorded the video rather than when you joined the membership, though I'm going to try to keep it updated as much as possible. So, if this is your first post show, which for some of you it might be, welcome. It's good to have you here, and today we're going to be talking about the Chicago 7, which is a subject that I really enjoy. I didn't know about it until maybe 2019, but I became more aware of it after the movie, which is still my favorite historic movie ever. History movies are typically not that good. They're not good tellings of history, and sometimes they're not even good films. However, every once in a while, you can find a gem. Something not produced by Mel Gibson, something that's like seems to care about the history at least a little bit, and where they have to pull away from it and do more creative stuff, you can tell that it's thoughtful and isn't there to contradict the spirit of the character. And I think that's something really cool about the Trial of the Chicago 7. If you've not seen the film, it's on Netflix. It's wonderful. It's by Aaron Sorkin. I think he was the director, and it's just a fantastic film. If you don't know about the Chicago 7 in general, here's a quick synopsis of what happened. So in the late 60s, we're just about to transition into the 70s as this is happening. Hippies are walking the earth. The radical left is really mad about this whole Vietnam War thing, and they want to protest the party that's in power. At the time, the party in power is the Democratic Party. A lot of people associate the Vietnam War with Richard Nixon, but he didn't come in until after the events that trigger the trial of the Chicago 7. So a bunch of radical leftists, whether they be the Youth International Party, the Yippies, or the Black Panthers, or various other local or national liberal groups, they came to the Democratic Convention and they set up in the park nearby, and they protested. And they didn't have permits, which was they tried to get permits, but they weren't granted them. A lot of the powers that be were really trying to deny them the space to do this because they just feared it in general. It was such a disruptive thing that could potentially be occurring here. So they ended up protesting anyway. You didn't give them like the resources they need. They showed up anyway. And the protest occurred, and eventually a fight breaks out between the Chicago Police Department and the protesters. Later, we find out that actually the Chicago Police Department, based on investigations that occurred after, the Chicago Police Department is the one that caused the fight. However, a group of prominent radical leftists end up being charged with conspiracy to cross state lines to incite a riot. That's basically what the trial is about. And they group all of these guys together. it's kind of convenient for the government that they are grouping together all these people who are considered kind of threats to the established order in one big trial. You got Bobby Seale, who is one of the founding members of the Black Panther Party. We got Dave Dellinger, who's this prominent pacifist and conscientious objector who protests the war. We got Tom Hayden. We got so many interesting figures that are among this. And then we have like a couple local organizers like Lee Weiner, who has a fantastic book about his perspective during all of this, and it's called Conspiracy to Riot. I highly recommend it. So the videos that we have for today, this one is like a news story leading into that film coming out, and the next one is actually a Watch Mojo thing where they talk about the top 10 things that that I think are different in the movie from reality, because you're gonna have things wrong when it comes to historical movies when you are trying to create drama. However, I think this film, whenever they had to create something, they did it in a tasteful way, in a way that was really, really smart. We're gonna be talking about this guy in the bottom corner a whole bunch, and I'm gonna save a little bit of it to comment on as we get into this first video. So let's get it started.
The story of the Seven, the Chicago Seven, is a story of protest and confrontation from long ago that's about to be retold in a new movie. Tracy Smith takes us back.
No justice, no peace. No justice, no peace.
In 2020, as the season of social unrest has become the autumn of discontent, it's remarkable how it looks like another time, 52 summers ago. In 1968, there was revolution in the air.
One young rebel climbed up.
Yeah, so this film, it was a project that was kind of planned for a long time, but got kicked into gear when Donald Trump started making his meteoric rise politically. So in a lot of ways, it's a response to him, but in a lot of ways, it's also a very timeless story.
Up to lower the American flag to half-mast.
The nation was in turmoil over civil rights, split over the Vietnam War.
A handful of police clubbed a protest leader.
And in late August, outside the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, around 10,000 protesters squared off with about 23,000 police and National Guard troops. And all hell broke loose.
In less than a minute, what had been a relatively quiet crowd was a raging mob.
7 months later, the government charged the suspected ringleaders with, among...
Yeah, so as we know now, the police were largely responsible for this. I'm not saying that the protesters did nothing wrong ever. They were probably raising some hell, but this particular fight, it was found that the police actually started this fight. Perhaps they just had enough. Maybe the protesters were really, really getting on their nerves, and they decided, okay, let's put them down. But this particular conflict was started by the police. The one that they're showing here.
Conspiracy and crossing state lines to incite a riot. At first, there were 8 Chicago defendants: Jerry Rubin, Abby Hoffman, Tom Hayden, Rennie Davis, Bobby Seale, Lee Weiner, John Froines, and David Dellinger.
So yeah, most of these guys I know all right. John Froines, I don't think I know much about. I don't think he's portrayed much in the film too much. Abby Hoffman is one of the most unique political thinkers of his time. I think most people could find him to be very interesting. Politically, he has some socialistic beliefs, but he also has some like anarchistic beliefs. He's very hard to just put into a box. These two here, Rubin and Hoffman, they were leaders of the Yippies, which sounds like hippies, but not necessarily. They aesthetically were very hippie. They were the Youth International Party, and they were aggressively fighting against the war. But one thing you'll find is that a lot of these people come from different groups. Some of them might know each other, like, but we have, like, I think this one's Lee Weiner. Lee Weiner is a local organizer, while Tom Hayden was more of a national organizer. And while we have Bobby Seale, who's part of his own left-wing Black Power political movement. And you'll find out a lot of these people, they have stuff in common, but not, they don't perfectly fit into the box together. That's what makes people think that this trial is so very cynical, because you're just packing all these people into one defense, and they're all like public enemies of the government. Of the new administration definitely hates these guys and are going after them in sort of a cynical way. And it's weird to see people who have made violent rhetoric, like Bobby Seale. He'll say violent rhetoric, but it'll often be in self-defense. Sometimes Abby Hoffman, he'll use some violent rhetoric. But then you have Dave Dellinger, who's in the bottom right corner. Total pacifist. He is a committed pacifist. He does not do violence. Why is he on the same stand as all these other people? It's very easy to see how somebody would not have a whole lot of faith in this.
John Froines and David Dellinger.
The law doesn't recognize political trials.
No, we weren't arrested. We were chosen.
Their trial is now the subject of a new Netflix film, The Trial of the Chicago 7. Let's rehearse. Written and directed by Aaron Sorkin.
We're giving them exactly what they want, a stage and an audience.
Abby Hoffman, who's shown here, played by Sacha Baron Cohen, his accent, you will find his accent to be very odd. I thought when I first saw the film, I hadn't heard Abby Hoffman talk. He has this really, really strong Boston accent. Like, he really drops the R's and really leans into his vowels a whole lot. And I thought, like, wow, his accent is terrible. But then I went back and watched some clips of Abby Hoffman. He had, like, a cartoon's version of a Boston accent. It's actually kind of accurate. It's kind of crazy.
By Aaron Sorkin.
He also resembles the guy more than anybody
A
else.
stage and an audience.
Yeah, you really think there's going to be a big audience?
The movie's been in the works for 14 years, but Sorkin says it took on a new urgency after President Donald Trump took office.
Was there a moment in Donald Trump's ascendancy when you said, okay, now I need to tell this story?
Well, it began when he was running for president, and at his rallies, when a protester would shout out something, he'd become nostalgic.
Like to punch him in the face, I'll tell you.
About the old days when they'd beat the crap out of him and punch him in the face.
Do you know what they used to do to guys like that when they were in a place like this? They'd be carried out on a stretcher, folks.
The old days he was talking about was 68.
The police.
It really is a good time to tell a story like this, because I feel that people, well, this happens in any generation. I don't think anybody is necessarily beyond this. The idealization of times gone by. Things are so bad now, they must have been better before. But this shows you that that's not necessarily all that appealing. The aggressive shutting down of protesters. And you know what? It still is that way. When people protest to maintain the status quo, they're usually sitting pretty comfy. But if you are somebody pushing for radical change, like these guys were, they're not going to treat you all that gently. And we learned that again and again. We learned it rather recently with a lot of the treatment of the Black Lives Matters protesters. And that is a thing. You don't drive a vehicle into a crowd of protesters as a police officer. Like, it's insane, some of the stuff that some people getting attacked and sprayed with mace or whatever or pepper spray probably, who are not actively like committing violence. A lot of people who it's like, you have a hammer and everything looks like a nail. That's how a lot of the treatment was during those protests, and it seems like it was a very similar situation here. It's kind of one of those reasons why we should be skeptical of putting too much power in the hands of any individuals, because people are flawed. These police officers are flawed. Police officers today are flawed. They're just people. They're not better than you or me.
Police advanced into the crowd, clubbing those who resisted.
One of those protesters, Chicago 7 defendant Rennie Davis, needed a stretcher after taking a billy club to the head.
I was being clubbed by police, and police were literally screaming, "Kill Davis."
Oh my goodness. And how bad was your head injury?
I had to go to the hospital, and so I'll tell a story now that I've never shared before publicly. I went to the hospital to get 13 stitches, and the police realized that I was in the hospital because they knew I had been clubbed, and so they started a search of the hospital room by room by room. And mostly the nurses, they could end their career by what they did. I mean, they put me on a trolley cart and covered me with a sheet and moved me from room to room.
To hide you from the police.
To hide from the police, yeah.
Jeez. Yeah, some of these guys are still around. I didn't even think about like how many of these guys are still around. I know Lee Weiner's still around. Bobby Seale's pretty old at this point, but I think he's still alive, right? It's weird not being sure with some of these other people, but like some of them are gone. Abby Hoffman's gone, but a lot of them are still around and can still tell their story.
For protesters and the police who were ordered to stop them, it was a dangerous game. But the activists all knew what they were in for, says former defendant Lee Weiner.
Did you know going in that you were risking prison time?
That was always, of course, not only a possibility, but a probability. What are we going to not do it just because of that? Not a chance.
We've heard testimony that your plans for the convention were designed specifically to draw the police into a confrontation.
Well, if I'd known it was going to be the first wish of mine that came true, I would have aimed a lot higher.
Actor Sacha Baron Cohen studied Abby Hoffman long before he played him.
Everything pointed to one man.
Who is this guy? Is he?
He really does look like him there. You see Sacha Baron Cohen, and then you see him. He really, like, not all of them did like a full physical transformation to and capture their character, but he did like that's pretty close. I think Sacha Baron Cohen, he's a little old to be Abby Hoffman at the time, but he managed it. There's some points where you see Sacha Baron Cohen's age though, and I don't know if I'm trying to remember how old Abby Hoffman was. He wasn't all that old.
Is he a fool, or is he actually the smartest guy in the room?
What do you think?
I think he was the smartest guy in the room. He developed this whole style of protesting that was designed to elicit as much media attention as possible. And even during the riots in Chicago, Abby...
So you'll learn a lot about the trial when you watch the movie. I think you'll get a good amount of it, but there are a few things that are wrong and kind of embellished, and some things that are a little bit made up to kind of convey who the characters are. And sometimes that's a thing that's going to happen with historical film. I find it to be somewhat okay if either it pulls from something that captures who the person really was, if it helps you to express more who they were. There are some ways of getting away with it. Here's one thing that is half true. So the judge was super against the defense here, and that was pretty clear early on. I think they were banking on an appeal from pretty early on. Once they got him, they're probably thinking, okay, we're going to be able to appeal this, no problem. Let's have fun with this while we can. So Abby Hoffman and Jerry Rubin, they showed up wearing judicial robes kind of to mock the judge. And the judge gave them contempt citations for that and had them disrobe. In the film, they disrobe and they reveal police uniforms underneath, which seems like such a thing they would do, but it's not a thing they did. That's an extra element added by the film. But I'm sure Abby Hoffman would look at that and be like, oh, we should have thought of that. We should have thought of that.
And even during the riots in Chicago, Abby always had his mind on where the cameras were.
We can't fight it in the court because this is the cat, and these are the people that are putting us on trial, see?
In fact, Hoffman and his co-defendant Jerry Rubin became celebrities in their own right, as observed by our own Bob Schieffer.
It was raining, it was cold, in short, it was not a fit night out for man and beast. So it was only natural that those masters of media manipulation, Abby Hoffman and Jerry Rubin, should choose this night to hold a news conference.
The only people that can stop this trial are the people in the streets.
The U.S. Attorney wanted a Negro defendant to scare the jury. I was thrown in to make the group look scarier.
Bobby
But
Seale.
the trial was a very different experience for the lone black defendant.
So Bobby Seale is the most obvious case of somebody being thrown in that didn't really belong among them. And you can argue maybe he should have stood trial and maybe there was enough ambiguity to get him on the stand, but he shouldn't have been part of this big thing. He would have deserved his own trial. So he came in, he gave a speech, he met some of the guys who he's sharing a bench with for the first time, and then he left. I'm not saying Bobby Seale is beyond violence. He was on trial. He was I think wanted for the killing of a police officer in Connecticut at the time, and after this trial he's supposed to be going over there to face justice over there. I don't know what the case was for that. I believe that was a case of like manslaughter or self-defense or something. I don't remember how well he did in that or not. I love the Black Panther Party and learning about them, but I don't know all that much about that particular case.
Bobby Seale. Seale wound up representing himself, and he clashed with Judge Julius Hoffman.
Bobby Seale was gagged and chained today for refusing to obey the judge. Handcuffs were clamped onto both wrists, leg irons shackled both boots, and a white linen cloth reinforced with adhesive tape was knotted behind his neck.
It was breathtaking.
That is depicted pretty well in the film. This is a real thing that happened. He kept speaking out. He's like, and the judge is like, if you don't restrain yourself, you will be then restrained. And the judge does have the power to do that, but the image was so dark, and they already kind of suspected that the judge was pretty racist from the beginning. And Bobby Seale was eventually like removed from this trial. The image in front of the jury was tainted when you see a black man who's unrepresented. That's one of the big problems too. Bobby Seale had a particular lawyer that he wanted to defend him. Well, his lawyer had, I believe, emergency gallbladder surgery shortly before before the trial started, and the judge refused to delay it till the lawyer would be able to attend. So he was left pretty much undefended, and none of the other lawyers wanted to take his case because if they did, it would ruin his ability to appeal his case. The fact that he went unrepresented actually made it easier for him to appeal his case going forward.
He would try to pull his hands up, and then he would just be clubbed in front of the jury. And this went on for several days.
I wasn't in any contempt, but Judge Hoffman, I told him, I said, you in contempt of the American people.
Eventually, Bobby Seale's case was declared a mistrial, and the Chicago 8 became the Chicago 7.
So yeah, I think from the get-go, the Chicago 7 is already a misnomer. But I guess if you are going to lump it all together, Chicago 8 is proper, but a lot of people break it down to Chicago 7 and Bobby Seale, because he was especially removed from the rest of the guys. He did not. There was a good amount of people on that stand that he did not know.
5 were convicted of some charges, but all were overturned on appeal. Their trial is history, but it seems their fight is still very much alive.
We didn't need it to get more relevant, but it did.
The park is closed.
In Kenosha and Kentucky and Washington, when you see, once again, peaceful protesters being met with tear gas, nightsticks. You got to care a lot about this country to go out in the street and face that kind of danger. You got to care a lot about America.
Anti-war demonstrators gathered in Grant Park this
Then, as now, the demonstrators risked their safety and their freedom to make themselves heard.
Hell
Surrounded
yeah.
by grim, silent soldiers, the demonstrators decided to sing.
And, according to former Chicago 7 defendant Lee Weiner, it was all worth it.
It was crazy, for sure. It was hard. It was brutal. It was dangerous. It was an effort by the government to belittle our efforts and our beliefs that America would be better. And so we had to fight back. And in that fighting back, we did not a bad job.
Man, the 60s were so wild. So, yeah, and the next thing I have right here is a Watch Mojo video, which actually goes over the things that were gotten right or wrong about the film. And one thing that I like about the film, sometimes they'll create dialogue for characters, but it'll often be grounded in things that the character actually said. Abby Hoffman is one of the big cases of this. They'll have him say things in the trial that he didn't say on the trial, but he did say it at another point. And I think that's a great way of, if you do have to create dialogue for a character in a history-based film, that's not a bad way of going about it, because it really does demonstrate stuff about the actual historical figure. You just got to use it in a context that at least somewhat resembles the one that they were using when they originally said it. And yeah, so let's see what Watch Mojo has.
Riots were started by the
I wonder how many of these I even know. Oh, yeah. They got, I forgot what his name was, but they got a guy from the, who was it? You know what? Actually, they're probably going to say it in the video. This is one of those cases where I'm going to look it up and then they're just going to say it in the video, but yeah, this guy's important.
Were started by the Chicago Police Department.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're counting down our picks for the top 10 things the trial of the Chicago 7 got factually right and wrong.
Cite Mr. Counselor with his second count of contempt.
Sending Daphne O'Connor
he's good.
to break my heart.
The actor who played the judge was fantastic. And if you're interested in the more historical side of this, they have the transcript for the whole trial, well, most of the trial on Audible, where they had actors actually do the voices and stuff, and it's very well done. It's one of my favorite things in my Audible library. I go back to it all the time. I highly recommend it. The actual words being quoted right back to you are just as interesting as the movie itself, if not more so.
It was way out of line.
Mr. Kunstler, the demonstrators attacked the police, and the police responded.
For this list, we're looking at plot points from this historical legal drama that were true to real life or fictionalized for the sake of storytelling. What did you think of the trial of the Chicago 7? Let us know in the comments. Number 10. Hoffman and Rubin wore judicial robes. Right.
I have an egg.
Here we
The film
go.
portrays Abby Hoffman and Jerry Rubin as a couple of jokers who treat the trial almost like performance art.
And the record should reflect that Defendant Hoffman and I are not related.
Father, no.
I love that so much. That's such a Abby Hoffman thing to say. He really was just the funniest and probably one of the smartest guys in the room. Abby Hoffman was an idealist. He might act like a doofus, but he's a really intelligent dude. Like Thomas Jefferson was an idealist. But very few would deny that he was one of the most intelligent guys in any room he was in. It's weirder with Abby Hoffman because he's so comedic and he paints himself as unserious, but that's all very deliberate, the way that he puts himself forward. When it comes to the judge and distinguishing the names of him and Abby Hoffman, it was really interesting. So Judge Hoffman it presided over it, and they're not related. And that was something that he really wanted to emphasize, like, I'm not related to this guy. But he also had a lot of trouble with names. People questioned the judge's mental capacities. He got everybody's name wrong. Dave Dellinger was Mr. Derringer. Leonard Weinglass was Leonard Fineglass. Every other sentence, Weinglass was one of the defense lawyers, but he got like everyone's name wrong constantly, and he got mad at people sometimes when they tried to set the record straight and be like, this person's named this, but like they're just trying to make sure everybody knows who everybody is. Like the jury has to know who's who.
See it as an opportunity to attract the media and more young people to the Yippie movement, undermining the no-nonsense judge around every turn.
Mr. Rubin, Mr. Hoffman, what are you wearing?
It's an homage to you, Your Honor.
One such example is when they appear in court wearing judicial robes, much to Judge Hoffman's annoyance.
Take off the robes, please.
And that part was real. This is not, though.
Silence!
Like I said, it's not real, but this is totally something that like if Abby Hoffman saw this film, he'd be like, that's brilliant. We should have done that. That feels like something that he would have loved to have done because it's very much in his style. So while it may not be perfectly true, it does tell you something about the real person, I think. When you only have so much time to convey who this guy is, I think this gives you a pretty good idea who this guy is.
In real life, Hoffman and Rubin did show up in robes one day, although they were not wearing police uniforms underneath as depicted in the film. Upon taking the robes off, they used them to wipe their feet. This actually sounds like something that Sacha Baron Cohen might do if he were on trial, making his casting as Abby all the more brilliant. Number 9, FBI agent Daphne O'Connor. Wrong. Played by Caitlin Fitzgerald, Daphne O'Connor is an undercover FBI agent who has a sort of romance with Jerry Rubin after buying him a drink at a bar.
Yeah, that was kind of
Nobody's ever
weird.
sent me a drink before.
How do you like it so far?
I mean, if you're undercover, it is a strategy you might use.
It's a Tom Collins. I know it's kind of a country club drink, but they're delicious.
Despite coming to empathize with Rubin's cause, O'Connor takes the stand and breaks his heart.
The demonstrators attacked the police, and the police responded.
Much like Rooney Mara's character in The Social Network, Daphne O'Connor is pure.
So, like, every radical leftist was being followed at this point. Especially, like, Bobby Seale, the Black Panthers were, like, really under the microscope or the magnifying glass of the FBI, but radical leftist movements, most of them had been infiltrated by government officials, so they had so many spies basically able to take people down whenever the time came.
Purely a creation of Aaron Sorkin. Granted, there are a few undercover agents who got close to the Chicago 7.
Sending Daphne O'Connor to break my heart was way out of line.
Erwin Bach and William Frappoli infiltrated the Vets for Peace and the Students for a Democratic Society. Rubin was personally
Snick.
duped by Robert Pearson, a Chicago police officer who went undercover as his bodyguard. Yet, there are no reports indicating that Rubin had a 93-hour fling with an FBI agent.
Nothing is more dangerous than a crowd of people who are moving. It's like trying to redirect the Mississippi River.
Isn't she great?
Number 8, Judge Julius Hoffman's incompetence. Right.
That
You're
is
not going to
definitely
let the jury
correct.
hear his testimony. Not unless you can demonstrate to me, which you have not thus far done, that this witness...
Are you any good?
It's not uncommon for biopics to vilify authority figures, but
was
Judge
pretty
Julius
bad.
Hoffman was every bit as antagonistic as Frank Langella's portrayal.
Cite Mr. Counselor with his second count of contempt.
Described as, quote, impetuous and rude in Joseph Golden's 1974 book, The Benchwarmers, the 74-year-old Judge Hoffman prevented the jury from examining certain evidence that would have benefited the Chicago Seven.
Your parents received this note this morning in their mail. They
Oh, this is very real. This is something that really happened. Hold on.
called the police as they should have done.
As in the film, the families of 2 young jurors received threatening letters allegedly from the Black Panthers, which the defense claimed were forgeries. Judge Hoffman showed them the letters, leading one to leave the jury.
Do you still feel you can render a fair and impartial verdict?
No, sir.
You are dismissed from this jury.
According to attorney Gerald Lefcourt, Judge Hoffman was, quote, pro-government on a mission.
Yeah, because, like, she would not have seen those threats. The point that they're trying to make is that the fact that she now knows these threats from apparently the Black Panther Party, which are suspected to not be actually from the Black Panther Party, she sees these threats and it's like, oh, this has made me biased against him. I have to actually step down from the jury. But the fact is, if Hoffman had not shown her, she didn't actually know that the threat existed. He showed her and therefore basically forced her to throw herself off of the jury. So, yeah, he kind of screwed them over if she was at all sympathetic to their cause.
Viewing the defense team as the, quote, enemy from day one. As such, the judge issued 175 counts of contempt of court throughout the trial. Number 7. Richard Schultz was sympathetic to the defendants. Wrong.
No.
Although he was a junior prosecutor, the film suggests that Richard Schultz sympathized with the Chicago Seven.
Nah, we're all on the same team. Yes.
Yeah, he's probably the most wrong out of any character. I feel like they didn't capture him at all compared to like the other characters that they really got spot on.
Sense, I guess, but in a much truer sense, we're not.
While Schultz does his job, he doesn't get much joy from it. Meanwhile, lead prosecutor Tom Ferran shows little empathy for the defendants. It's Schultz who pleads with Judge Hoffman to have mercy on Bobby Seale, leading to his mistrial.
I'm issuing an order declaring a mistrial as to the defendant, Bobby G. Seale.
In reality, this was the U.S. Attorney's Office's doing. Several people have argued that Schultz was far more hot-headed than seen in the movie, earning a reputation as, quote, the government's pit bull.
What are you doing? Respect for the fallen?
Defendant David Dellinger went as far as to call Schultz, quote, a snake and a, quote, Nazi. Some would also debate that Ferran was the more restrained of the two, although he did make plenty of controversial comments. Number 6, David Dellinger punched a marshal. Wrong. David Dellinger is depicted...
This is supposed to be like this dramatic moment where like he punches a marshal and then you see like the guilt on his face and it's supposed to, I guess, symbolize how committed to pacifism he is, where he breaks from that and it just breaks him. So as a narrative device, it's kind of cool, but I honestly think it undermines him in a way that's not really fair.
As a radical pacifist who wanted to keep the protests peaceful.
You're a thug because you are. Dave. Please sit, Mr. Dellinger.
Dellinger is finally pushed to his limits when Judge Hoffman throws out key testimony, calling him a, quote, thug.
If we're guilty, why not give us a trial? Dave. Marshals, Seat the defendant.
If we're guilty, which you have clearly decided.
Dave, I've got Watch yourself.
This culminates in Dellinger punching a marshal and apologizing before being dragged out.
Watch you
Although it is
it's like it's instinctive, as if it's something he would do, but it's not something he would do. That's one of those things where I don't think they were even fair enough to Dellinger there. He was a very principled dude, it seems.
A powerful moment, Dellinger never used physical violence in court. This isn't to say Dellinger never threw a punch in his life.
He was really...
He showed great remorse for knocking out another man in college, which may have inspired this scene. Throughout the trial, however, Dellinger stuck by his pacifist world.
I didn't know about that. He showed great remorse for knocking out a guy in college. So that is pulling from his life, but he's far removed from that. So giving that to this much older, more older, wiser version of him, it kind of moves the person he was in the time that the film is based on. It moves that character back kind of like in his emotional development in order to... I don't know, I'm kind of conflicted about that decision.
Worldview. That said, he was escorted out at one point for interrupting a witness. It was at this point that Dellinger made his snake and Nazi comments about Schultz. Number 5. The jury didn't hear Ramsey Clark's testimony. Right.
An investigation by our criminal division led to the conclusion that the riots were started by the Chicago Police Department.
In the film, the case is seemingly blown wide open when Attorney General Ramsey Clark takes the stand.
Attorney General, that's who it was, and it was Ramsey Clark. I forgot his name earlier. I didn't want to go look it up because I knew they were going to have to bring this up. This was so real. And it's insane. You have the testimony of the Attorney General of the United States, or former, of the previous administration, and you're not allowed to use it. They brought him out for this, and nope, no, we're not even going to let the jury hear it. They had to talk to him not in front of the jury, and they wouldn't let the jury hear what he had to say. That was bull.
He recounts telling the president over the phone that the Chicago PD likely started the riots. The jury isn't present to hear this bombshell, however, and Judge Hoffman decrees that his testimony will not be shared.
You're not going to let the jury hear his testimony. Not unless you can demonstrate to me, which you have not thus far done, that this witness... Sir. Are you any good?
Judge Hoffman did in fact bar Clark as a defense witness, ruling that he made, quote, no relevant or material contribution to the case. It's debatable if Clark's testimony truly would have been the smoking gun the film leads us to believe.
It's kind of huge.
I will be forced to find you in contempt. You understand?
Nevertheless, defense attorney William Kunstler called Judge Hoffman's ruling, quote, absolutely unheard of in the history of the United States, adding that it, quote, sets a precedent that is horrendous to contemplate. Number 4, Jerry Rubin's arrest. Wrong. In one of the movie's most intense moments, the police and protesters clash atop a hill, although this played out differently in reality. A fleet of officers wasn't waiting for the protesters when they arrived at the General John Logan Memorial. On the contrary, a significant number of cops intervened after the crowd started taking the hill. The scene shows Rubin rescuing a female protester carrying an American flag as 3 men force themselves on her. While there doesn't appear to be any account of this happening, Robert Pearson claims that a conflict did erupt over a communist flag.
Don't move, Jerry.
Man, get those guys!
You're under arrest.
Even so, Rubin wasn't arrested during the riot as the film depicts, but at a later time when he was on the street with a buddy. Number 3, Flow All Over the City speech. Right. We get to the root of the riots as Rennie Davis is beaten by the police at Grant Park.
Out of nowhere.
Tom Hayden, he looks nothing like Tom Hayden, but I love his performance. It's the guy from the Fantastic Beasts movies, which is, it's weird that that's the only other thing I know him from. But he's brilliant in his portrayal of, I guess, the ideas of Tom Hayden, but, like, he looks nothing like him.
Root of the riots as Rennie Davis is beaten by the police at Grant Park.
Out of nowhere.
Motivating Tom Hayden to deliver his blood flowing all over the city speech. Although this wasn't the first time Hayden got fired up, it's widely believed that Davis's beating ignited his speech and the ensuing chaos.
Yes, absolutely. If blood is going to flow, let it flow all over the city. The gas is going to be used. Let it go down all over Chicago. We're going to the convention. Let's get on the street.
Through his research, Aaron Sorkin found that Hayden meant to say our blood. In an interview with GQ, Sorkin said, quote, "I think that there's a part of Tom that feels like he inadvertently caused a tremendous amount of violence and all of the blood that was spilled that night. Not that Tom nor anyone else."
Yeah, when he's talking about like blood's going to flow over the city, it's like, whose blood are they talking? Are they gonna go out and start stabbing police officers? I guess in this case, he claims that he meant like, if they're going to beat us up, we gotta go out there and just make ourselves present all throughout the city, and people will see us suffering for what's right, is I guess the argument he's making here. He has a degree of deniability, so I don't know. I don't think, from everything else I know about Tom Hayden, that he was just calling for people to just start hurting other people. It doesn't seem consistent with him. But in a moment of passion, who knows? I don't know. I'm not educated on that enough to say.
Thinks that the riot was Tom's fault. The police could have easily not started smacking people in the head with baseball bats.
Oh, you didn't try and stop anyone? No.
Number 2, Bobby Seale's mistreatment and Fred Hampton's death. Right. The Chicago 7 were truly the Chicago 8.
I said it would be impossible for me to care any less what you are tired of.
The 8th person in question was Black Panther Party co-founder Bobby Seale, who wasn't permitted to postpone his trial when his lawyer needed gallbladder surgery.
Gallbladder surgery, was that?
Yes, it was. Fred Hampton was assassinated last night.
Unable to
Fred Hampton was brilliant. He was a young member of the Black Panther Party. I think he was killed at like the age of 21. He was a huge figure in the Chicago chapter, so he was around during this time. And he was basically, the police broke into his house and just kind of slaughtered him. It's one of those things where they claim they were defending themselves, but it doesn't seem like he had the opportunity to be a threat to them. They were ready to take him out. And you know what? When it comes to Black civil rights leaders at the time, I don't doubt that at all. Now we are learning more and more about Malcolm X's assassination, and that the government was likely complicit in that, if not actually participants in it. They allowed it. I have some thoughts about the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. as well, but like let's not go down that rabbit hole right now. There's nothing at all surprising about an up-and-coming civil rights leader being taken down before they can be too much of a threat to the status quo. Fred Hampton, though, he's definitely worth looking into because he's one of the most brilliant people. For somebody as young as he was, he was so, like, if he were allowed to live on, who knows what he could have done.
Defend himself, Seale was left without counsel. Most notably, Seale really was restrained and gagged after an outburst. In the film, Seale's speech stems from Fred Hampton's shooting during a raid. Although this actually happened after Seale was bound in court, it's generally believed that Hampton's death was an assassination carried out by the FBI.
Do I have your assurance?
Seale was actually restrained for several days as opposed to a few minutes. Judge Hoffman would declare a mistrial, separating Seale from the other 7. Before we unveil our top pick, here are some honorable mentions.
Cool.
Abbie Hoffman discussed the trial in public. Right. Check out his album Wake Up America if you want to hear more.
They got Hayden. They got Hayden.
I haven't actually heard Wake Up America. I have his book. It's the book is called Steal This Book. If you're familiar with System of a Down, they also have Steal This Album is one of their albums. It's clearly taken from the Abby Hoffman book by a similar name, and it's kind of a guide to living minimalistically. It's a lot of things that are legally ambiguous and a lot of things that are flat out illegal. Sometimes it tells you stuff about acquiring the general necessities for nothing. How can you do that? How can you trick a restaurant owner into giving you free food? It's truly an insane book, and I don't know how many of his little lessons hold up today. He has like lessons on shoplifting and stuff, but I don't know how well that stuff holds up today with security being so different than it was at the time. But it's a weird book. You should check it out if you get the chance, because it's at least amusing.
Gotta march down to the police station.
March!
Overcome the cops and the Illinois National Guard and free Tom Hayden. We couldn't find our way out of the park.
March to bail out Tom Hayden. Right. Protesters and police did confront each other at the station.
I just noticed he has a karate gi on in this scene. I didn't notice that before.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe
Feels
to our
like
channel
something you
and
do.
ring the
Maybe
bell
you
to
did.
get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications.
Thanks. I didn't know how to do
Number
that.
1, reading the names, right and wrong. The film ends on a high
this
note as
part.
Tom Hayden uses his closing statement to read off the names of the 4,752 U.S. troops who died in Vietnam since the trial started.
Private Eric Allen Bosch, 21 years old.
Mr. Kunstler.
Lance Corporal Robert Earl Ellis, 19 years old.
It's a triumphant moment, but did it really happen? Yes
Kinda.
and no. While names of fallen soldiers were read aloud in court, it wasn't at the end of the trial, and it wasn't Hayden who led this act.
Lance Corporal Douglas W. Jackson, 19 years old.
It actually happened on October 15th, 1969, almost 4 months before sentencing, and David Dellinger read the names.
Feels like something he would do.
19 years old.
It feels more like Tom Hayden and Abby Hoffman were kind of painted as the main characters in this. I think Dellinger took more of a backseat role, even though he was no less important than either of them.
Corporal Kenneth Joe Austin, 18 years old.
Judge Hoffman initially wasn't present as the names were being read. When he entered the courtroom, Judge Hoffman made Dellinger stop and an argument ensued. While altered, the ending we get is classic Aaron Sorkin.
Richard Henry Durant, 20 years old. Lance Corporal Harry Earl Palmer, 20.
Do you agree with our picks? Check out this other recent clip from Watch Mojo and be
So it's a really, really good film. If you're interested in like legal films or historical films, it's really good. And now you know some of the things that they got right and wrong if you didn't know beforehand, and that'll make it a little easier to appreciate it in its historical context when you do check it out. But so much of the dialogue is just pulled from the transcript of the trial, which is what makes it so fantastic. Because the trial, it's one of those things where reality was entertaining enough in a lot of aspects. I don't know. Yo, so I hope you guys enjoyed the post show. I don't know how long it's been. I hope it was long enough. Let me know if you guys have anything you want me to check out in next week's stream or next week's post show. I'm always trying to figure stuff out. I'll try to have it recorded on time this time. So, thanks. And you'll be in the crawl. To the new members, you'll be in the crawl for the next as long as you're members. I'm going to be updating the crawl, and I'll be keeping you in it as long as you're active, yo. And I really appreciate it. And I'm going to be trying to get out some other members only content when I finish all my schoolwork, because School comes first or something. All right. Thank you for watching, and I will see you guys on Sunday, probably, for another stream. All right. Bye.